and welcome to CFN Media. I'm John Vennari, editor of Catholic Family News. We are now in a period that marks the 50th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council. And I believe the best way to mark this anniversary is to take a realistic look of what this council is. Now, we know that turmoil has been the defining characteristic within the Church since the time of the Second Vatican Council, and we also know that this turmoil is not the result of a misinterpretation of the council texts, but of the council texts themselves. Just consider some of the most striking quotations regarding the Second Vatican Council, and this is just a little collection. There's a lot more, but I've narrowed it down to 6. I call them the 6 strikes against Vatican II. Strike 1. Cardinal Giuseppe Siri of Genoa, in his book Gethsemane, he said, quote, "If the Church were not divine, the Council would have buried her," close quote. Strike 2. The liberal Cardinal Joseph Soenens of Belgium, he rejoiced, he said, quote, "Vatican II is the French Revolution of the Church," close quote. Strike 3. Bishop Thomas Morrow, a prelate who participated at Vatican II, and here's what he said later in life. He said, quote, "I was relieved when we were told that this council was not aiming at defining or giving final statements on doctrine, because a statement on doctrine has to be very carefully formulated, and I would have regarded the council documents as tentative and liable to be reformed." Strike 4. At the close of the council, the bishops asked Council Secretary Archbishop Felici for that which theologians call the theological note of the council. In other words, what is the theological weight of these documents? Here's how Felici replied. He said, quote, "We have to distinguish, according to the schemas and the chapters, those which have already been the subject of dogmatic definitions in the past. As for the declarations which have a novel character," he said, "we have to make reservations." Strike 5. Liberal Protestant observer at the council, Robert McAfee Brown, shortly after Vatican II, he wrote a book called The Ecumenical Revolution. Now, in that book, he openly despises Pope Pius XI's and Pope Pius XII's magisterial teaching regarding ecumenism, because both of these documents, the one Mortalium Animus by Pius XI and the Instruction on Ecumenism by Pius XII, 1949, both of them insist that the one and only way to Christian unity is the conversion of non-Catholics to the Catholic Church. But McAfee Brown goes on to say that he loved Vatican II's decree on ecumenism because this council text nowhere mentions the need for non-Catholics to convert to the Catholic Church as the ultimate goal for Christian unity. And the document goes even further. It goes so far as to recognize the alleged ecclesial reality of Protestant assemblies. Now, this is a bombshell. This is unprecedented. We don't have time to talk about this here. We'll talk about it in the future. Strike 6. Our dear friend Walter Cardinal Casper. As we know, he is an ardent advocate of ecumenism, but he recently admitted the confusion within the council texts themselves. He did this in an article he wrote on April 12th, 2013 in the Observatore Romano. I'm going to quote him directly. He says, quote, "In many places, the council fathers had to find compromise formulas in which often the position of the majority are located immediately next to those of the minority, designed to delimit them. Thus, the conciliar texts themselves have a huge potential for conflict and open the door to a selective reception in either direction." And as is documented in The Rhine Flows into the Tiber by Father Wilkin, Pope John's Council by Michael Davies, Iota Unum by Romano Amerio, The ambiguities, the omissions, and the lack of precision in this council is no accident. They were no accident. They were the result of deliberate calculations by progressivist theologians and bishops who intended to exploit these flaws in the text after the council closed. And this is what they did. This is not even a matter of debate anymore. This is something that many Catholics know well. Maybe you watching this might be hearing this for the first time. But the chaos resulting is well attested by the present ruinous state of the Church throughout the world. In fact, the very fact that it's commonly held that Vatican II documents can admit two interpretations, what they call the hermeneutic of discontinuity and the alleged hermeneutic of reform and continuity, that they can be interpreted in a liberal way and a so-called conservative way. This testifies to the lack of scholastic precision within the documents themselves. I mean, no one even pretends that the magnificent documents of Vatican I or the documents of the Council of Trent, these precise documents, no one even pretends that these documents can be interpreted in any other way than exactly as they're written. Father Joseph Ratzinger, in his 1966 book, Theological Highlights of Vatican II, he celebrates the fact that the council documents were not written with scholastic language, but were written in a manner, and these are his words, in a manner that was pastoral and ecumenical. The Vatican II documents themselves are texts that are lacking in scholastic precision. Yet throughout the discussions between Rome and the Society of St. Pius X, today's Vatican constantly demands that the SSPX must accept Vatican II in its totality. Vatican Cardinal Koch, he said it is unthinkable to question Vatican II. Cardinal Ludwig Müller, the present prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he uses the H word. He said it is heresy to say that Vatican II constitutes a rupture with the past. It's unthinkable to question Vatican II? Let's take another look, just at what I quoted already. Let's take another look at what these documents are. What is openly admitted about these council texts. The texts are not carefully formulated, but tentative and liable to be reformed. The texts are applauded by liberal Protestants who simultaneously express revulsion at traditional Catholic teaching. The texts contain certain points that have a novel character of which we have to make reservations. The texts are compromised formulas that have a huge potential for conflict. Why then do our Catholic leaders constantly express this devotion to Vatican II and insist that traditional Catholics accept these texts without question? Don't our church leaders rather have the duty to deliver teaching that is free from confusion, to present to us documents that do not contain compromised formulas that have a huge potential for conflict and end up dividing Catholics who have been fighting over the real meaning of these council texts now for 50 years? Vatican II, the so-called Council of Unity, is actually the greatest cause of disunity among present-day Catholics. And I personally believe that the Second Vatican Council represents the greatest failure of church authority in history. So perhaps it is high time we take a more direct approach regarding the Second Vatican Council, not being simply on the defensive, explaining why this text is problematic or that text is questionable, but rather we should also respectfully go on the offensive and ask Vatican leaders why they pledge unqualified devotion to a council that is inherently flawed and that has caused and continues to cause colossal turmoil among the faithful. In the meantime, we resist the destructive novelties of Vatican II, and we adhere to the Catholic faith whole and undefiled, as we are commanded by the Athanasian Creed. For Catholic Family News, CFN Media, I'm John Vennari. See you next time.